Hello and welcome to the Splendid Rush Podcast, hosted by the Pinkin. My name is Winston Gallagher, and this is the first of what I hope will become an occasional podcast series, interviewing Norwich City players and staff from the 80s and 90s. In this episode, myself and my good friend and sound recordist Sean Smith flew out to Cyprus to interview one of Norwich City's most successful managers, Mike Walker. I hope you enjoy the show. Mike Walker, thank you very much for joining us.
No problem.
So we'll start at the very start of your managerial career. After retiring as a player for Colchester in 1983, you were appointed assistant manager there. Had you always wanted to go into management?
Yes, I think so, yeah. I mean, when you say always, probably from about 20, when I was playing, and I suddenly thought, this could be a way on,
20 is young for knowing that you want to be a coach, I'd say.
Yeah, I guess, but it was never like, I'll stop it now and coach, It was always like, I'll do what I can as a player, and then when it comes to the time, we'll look at it again.
So you were assistant manager for 3 years, and then you got the top job at Colchester. You were top of the league in the 4th division. You just won manager of the month, and you got sacked, and 4 days later you were reserve team manager at Norwich. That's a hell of a week. Talk me
It was a hell of a week, but it obviously mixed good and bad, I think we beat Crewe on the Friday night and went top. And then on Sunday I went to see a charity game with the youth team, or reserves were playing. And after that I got called into the chairman, got called into his office and told I'd been sacked. I was just absolutely gobsmacked, And you see, but I never really found out why. But the only assumption you can make, and it was, I heard things after, was that we played too much football for the 4th division, because it was 4th division those days.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's a rubbish, how can you play too much football? Especially if you're top, if you play a certain way and it's not good enough, then you get the sack, you expect that.
And he thought you needed to be a bit more direct.
A bit more robust, shall we say. And hence the appointment of another manager who was a bit of a long ball merchant, and they were relegated the next season.
And so it was a very quick turnaround between getting sacked from Colchester and arriving at Norwich as reserve team manager. How did that come about?
Well, I got to thank Ken Brown for that. Ken had obviously watched what I was doing at Colchester and thought, it's in the lower leagues, but it's along our principles. And Norwich were known to be, a footballing side, let's be fair. They always were. And so quite out of the blue, within a couple of days, as you say, I got a contact from them saying, would you like to come along and work for us on the coaching side, It would be reserve manager to start with and see. And I thought, that was then the top league, it was the equivalent of the Premiership, obviously 1st division then. Yeah. And I didn't really have to think too much about it, I'd enjoyed being the main man, but then, it's just a big step up 2 or 3 leagues, so that was attractive. I went up there, we agreed everything. I said, yeah, fine. Kenneth said, great to come in, blah, blah, blah. Went back home, was sitting at home. Next thing I know, they lost the game, I think, on the Saturday, and he was sacked on the Sunday. Oh. And I thought, God, that's it, that's gone down the drain, that's it, finished. Next thing I know, Dave Stringer was appointed the manager, which is fair enough. He was the number 2, I think, and stepped up. And I thought, different guy, different attitude, maybe different ideas. But to be fair to Dave, again, I said to him, what do you... And he said, no, they've said to appoint you. I'm happy with that. So the job stood, So, and that was the start of it all. So I went up there a few days later when all the dust had settled down, and that was it.
And you were a reserve team manager for about 5 years before you got the top job at Norwich. Were you applying for first team manager roles elsewhere in that time, or were you just happy?
No, I thought, I worked my way through things, We're reasonably successful. The reserves did well. Nothing's daft, but, we were in a combination league, London combination, I think, and we used to be, there's the Chelsea's, the Arsenal, so you were a bit below them in quality, but we used to finish maybe 3rd or 4th, 5th sometimes, But that wasn't the key. The key was to bring on young lads. And I'd worked with first team players that had come down, either injured, dropped, or whatever. So I got a feeling for the players, and I think that helped me when I did step up. When I was eventually appointed.
So it's the summer before the 92-93 season. I don't think there's any secret that you weren't Robert Chase's first choice, because despite having success from within recruiting Ken Brown and Dave Stringer, he actually offered the job to Phil Neal, of all people, who had just been sacked from Bolton, who were mid-table in the old 3rd division. Were you aware that he'd been offered the job at the time, and had you thrown your hat in the ring? Were you in the mix?
Well, yeah. I don't know whether that was before or after, but obviously I knew other people were in for it. I mean, it's a good job, you know. I mean, it's a nice little place to live. So yeah, I knew he was, he was looking around, and obviously probably wanted the old big name, you know. But unfortunately with him, he didn't want to pay them. And then I don't know why, or whether it was the money. Possibly must have been a bit of it. He just came back to me, or whether somebody within the club had said, well, this guy could possibly do the job, you know. But I say, out of the blue, suddenly I was approached, and yeah, you got the job, you know, which I didn't hesitate to take, obviously.
I think it's probably fair to say that your appointment had a mixed reaction from the fans, because that big names had been mentioned. But by all accounts, the players were really happy, and you just said that you knew some of them from having worked with them in reserve teams. Like, did you get a good reaction from them when you got the job?
Yes, I mean the overall thing was good, as you say, and I think that was because I had a good basis coming through and working with even some of the first team players as well. You see, so I knew. And the way the team played just need tinkering with, in my opinion. I didn't think there was a lot to change. You know, I think Dave Stringer and Ken Brown always had them playing football, but there were a few things that I thought I could alter, you know, and I thought for the better, hopefully, anyway.
So what were the things that you thought you could tinker with?
Well, I just thought they ought to play a little bit more. I mean, we played a lot, mostly passing. There were certain players that couldn't get in the team that I thought would be beneficial in the team, you know, so you have a slight difference of opinion. And I'm referring in this instance to Ian Crook, who was there. He wasn't a soonest, you know, he didn't go tackling, and I know why Dave Stringer didn't play him a lot of times, because he didn't put his foot in, he didn't win the ball back enough, which is logical. Yeah. But I just took the other view. No, I'll put him in. I'll make him my fulcrum. Yeah. And that's exactly what he did.
I mean, arguably one of the best passers of the ball ever to play for Norwich.
Exactly, and I've rung up Terry Venables, I don't know how many times, but eventually he did come. He watched him a few times, and he did come calling. And the ironic thing was, the time he was in the England squad, he got injured. But that was one of the little things, just an example of changing things, you know.
So, having said that there was only a few tweaks that needed to be made, it still wasn't an easy job to walk into, I don't think. And this is probably a recurring theme across your career, because Norwich were overwhelming favourites for relegation that season, having just finished above the relegation zone the year before. And one of the first things you had to deal with when you came in was Robert Fleck wanting out. So did it feel like a bit of a baptism of fire, or are you quite sort of chilled about it all?
It's a challenge, but it's just something you've got to cope with, you know. And you just, you know, I had other players there that were good players, and we had a lot of good players coming through, so we just had to deal with the situation, you know, and that was, that's how it was.
So I read that in those kind of early days when you were first team manager, you'd be at training with your top off, your six pack out. Were you just working on the tan, or were you sending a message to your players in some way?
I don't know about top off and 6 pack, 12 pack more like that. But no, I like to get on. I mean, I was always out on the pitch. I was always out there, you know, trying to help or whatever. But I mean, I appointed John Dean as my coach, who was an ex-player, centre forward. And John was good in different ways, you know. I mean, he was, with due respect, he might not have been a great tactical man, but he could get the atmosphere right, you know. He would joke, and he'd have a laugh, but he was, you know, taken seriously as well. So he did his side on that, and I used to do the tactical, and, you know, more of that side was interesting to me, and get the players, you know, the right players doing the right thing at the right time.
So Jeremy Goss said you're a big bloke who could give you a hefty clump. Were you a disciplinarian? Like, what was your management style?
Oh yeah. For me, you have to be. I mean, you can't. You know, I don't think you've got to be a dictator. You know, you've got to let them know we can have a laugh and a joke, which I would do, same as John, but there's a line you can't go over. You know, you might push it a bit with John, but you can't push it with me. You know, you're going to know if you step over the line.
So 3 days before the start of that season, Robert Fleck finally leaves for Chelsea, but on the eve of the first game, Mark Robbins comes in. I think Dynamo Dresden were also in for him. Was it difficult to get him in from Man United?
Very, with Fergie. Was it? I looked at him because he wasn't in the team at the time. You know, he'd been in there. We all know he's a quality player, quality striker, and he was just what we wanted, in my opinion. And I remember saying, "Well, no, don't pay over 600,000 for him." But Fergie was adamant. It was 850, I think we paid for him in the end, 800, 850, and they said, "No, it's too much." But of course, he wouldn't budge off that. Robert Chase wasn't the best at spending money, but we, you know, twisted his arm, and we got him. So that was a good signing, in my opinion.
It was. Gary Megson also came in that summer, which I guess is a much less glamorous signing on paper. What was it you wanted from him?
As I said to you, Ian Crook was doing his job. I wanted someone then to put their foot in, somebody who could compete, somebody who wasn't a yes man, would have his opinion to me as well as and could order the players around a little bit. He wanted to, and so I thought he was ideal for that. We had a few arguments about the way we played actually. He's too much, because he was a bit of a long, like the longer ball. You say, well, we lost that because we didn't play enough long balls. No, we didn't. We lost it because of blah blah blah. But he was great. He came in, he did what I wanted him to do, and he respected it and got on with it. And I think it was a good signing.
So what you wanted from that team over the course of the season was to play lovely football, but with a bit of kind of grit and steel.
Yeah, you've got to have that. You can't just play tippy-tappy stuff and then, and because you'll come against the tough teams every now and again who won't allow you to do that, so you have to compete with them. And this is another thing, I thought we stepped up the training a lot. I just thought the training was a lot tougher. I don't know, you'd have to ask players that. But there were sessions where we had to get in the minds that, we want to be tougher. And not just be known for playing good football, but that if you have to come to dig it out, well, then we can do that.
So that first season was obviously hugely successful, finished third in the inaugural Premier League, which is still Norwich's highest ever league finish. We played some great football, scored a lot of goals. I'm not going to go through game by game, but I'll pick out some highlights and themes. So it started with a bang. First game of the season, Arsenal away, us favourites for relegation, them title contenders, 2-0 down at half time. Could be tempted to go into damage limitation mode, but that's not your style. What exactly did you say to them at half time? Because all Norwich fans know what happened next. We came out, scored 4 goals and won 4-2.
We looked round it and I thought, well, if we go at them, exactly the opposite. We're almost in awe. It's like, to hell with this. Let's go out there and play. Do what we can do. What we've been doing some of the games pre-season. It's the first game. It's a tester. We're 2-0 down. What are you going to do? You're going to lie down, or you're going to get out and show them that you can play. If we lose, we lose. But let's make a fight of it at least. And basically, and then I changed. Robbo came on, and he scored a couple. And the funny thing was, I felt, and I said at the time, that the one that was vulnerable for them was Adams, because he kept coming out and he's getting in positions like a little bit ahead of himself at times. I mean, let's be fair, he's a great defender and went on to be a great. But we thought we could expose that a bit, and with Robbo pulling him maybe around, and it seemed to work a bit, so it worked out all right in a sense. And then, as I said, we got the goals, and that to me was the catalyst. I mean, once we'd done that, the belief suddenly came back. 2-0 down, come back against Arsenal, decent side, and. It was just a question of keeping the feet on the ground a bit, but keeping the heads up.
I read a quote that said Mark Robbins came on 58 minutes, and I read a quote that you said just go on and score a couple. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, anybody can say that, I guess, but and it's not so. Obviously, 90% of the time doesn't happen, does it? Yeah. But we knew he had the quality, had capability. He's played at that level for ages. And we just knew he could. And the way we played, we thought we would get a few chances. Now it's a question: can you stick them in the net or can't you? Fortunately, it worked out. Other times, maybe subs it didn't work. But
yeah, well, certainly did. And in the next game, we went 1-0 down to Chelsea and won 2-1. I feel like certain managers have characteristics that run through their teams. Daniel Farke's Norwich side scored a lot of very late goals. For me, I feel like your teams quite often came from losing positions to win. Would you agree with
that? The fact, I think you'll find the statistics show that. And so it was a question of, as you said before, 2-0 down. Do you say, well, damage elimination and work from there and say, well, it was only 2-0, it was only 2-1, 3-1? Or do we say, no, we're better than that, let's try and do better? Which then builds confidence for me. So that was the same sort of thing. I always thought, and I tried to get to the players, and I think Chris Sutton had this quote one day, and they said, well, if they score 2, we'll score 3. But that was the attitude, basically. No, if they score 2, we'll score 3, and we could do that. That's the thing, if we play properly.
But particularly coming from behind as well, it wasn't just outscoring the opponents, it was kind of that mental resilience of going 1 down and then winning. I remember being at a game with my dad when I was a kid. I was probably 12, 13 around this period. And we went 1-0 down, and my dad turned to me and said, great, I love it when we go 1-0 down because we always win. And I read a match report in the Times from later that season. It had a lovely quote that said, because Norwich's habits are ingrained and because they're fighters, back they came. And is that a kind of mental resilience, do you think?
Oh yeah, they didn't. It is mental because obviously some teams go 1 down and they're finished. And they're not finished, is it? 1-0, okay? It can be 1-0 down after 10 minutes, and you can see teams visibly shrink, and they lose 3 or 4-0. So it is a thing. Okay, it wasn't great that we let in so many goals, but it didn't matter to a degree because we had the other side, and we wouldn't pack in. throw in the towel. And that was a good quality to have.
Of course, we didn't always come back from behind, and we got a few drop-ins that season, including losing 7-1 at Blackburn.
Yeah.
And we famously finished in third place, but with a negative goal difference, which is highly unusual. Why do you think we conceded so many goals?
I mean, we didn't have the quickest at the back, let's be fair. I mean, we had the first season, I mean, what was the back four? It was Bowen, Culverhouse, Butterworth, maybe sometimes John Paulson, sometimes Rob Newman. I think it was Rob Newman was out at the point. Mm-hmm. Well, great in the air. You know, anybody knocks balls in for Rob Newman and people and Paulson, all good competitors, but not the quickest, with due respect to them, particularly in the centre defence. And I think because we wanted to go up, you know, we often left space behind and people could knock it over the top, and it's what they did. Sometimes they didn't take the chances, or we defended really well, which of course we did sometimes, but other times they knocked the goals in, which is why the second season I made a few changes. We still let a lot in though, but it worked better for us, let's put it that way.
I read a quote from Chris Sutton that said that team was just never bothered by defeats. Is that something you sort of instilled into them?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're never bothered. No, I understand where he's coming from, which is good way for me to put that over. But of course you were bothered, you didn't like to lose. But take the 7-1. You know, we were bobbing along nicely there, and people were still doubting this. I think it was in October, something like that, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. And you know, it was like, well, wait till they get to 10 games. You know, they'll start losing and all this, because this relegation thing was still in the air. You know, and they couldn't believe it that we were doing so well. They'll blow up. But obviously, we didn't think that. And then we played that game, and we went up there. And if you look at the statistics, I think you'll find they had 9 shots on goal, and they scored 7. So it's a freak, and it was a freak. But having said that, we were very poor that day. So we lost. But again, with that, I remember very after we got a bit of stick, oh, that's it, they've crashed. You know, they've gone now. You watch, they'll start losing games. And I remember saying to the players after, look, really disappointed. We didn't do this, we didn't do that. But look at the statistics. 7 shots, how many times does that happen? Next game's important. We've got to go out there and play the same way we did, and I'm sure the results will turn around. Well, if I remember again, I think we played Carlisle in it was either the FA Cup or the League Cup. Yeah. We beat, that was midweek, I think. We won. And then we had QPR on the Saturday, which was back to the league, which was potentially a difficult game again, and we won that. And then we were off and running again on the run.
I can remember around that time, your kind of post-match interviews, we'd be top of the league, and you'd have a twinkle in your eye and say, well, you know, we only need however many more points to avoid relegation. Was that a kind of jibe at the pundits who were kind of writing us off even when we were up the top of the league?
No, I don't think it was conscious, and it wasn't necessarily meant as a dig. But if it was taken that way, great. You know, I don't mind at all. So
we also lost 4-1 to Liverpool that season, having allowed them to push the game back 24 hours because they had a game in Europe. Later in that season, there was a game against Wimbledon. We were awarded a penalty, but Dave Phillips told the ref it should be a corner rather than a penalty. And we won the Fair Play Award that year. Do you think we were too nice to win the league, despite having a bit of grit in the middle? Maybe.
But I think rather than be too nice, I just think we just weren't good enough, you know, when it came to it. That was a bit of naivety, probably from my philosophy of playing. And so it would be down to me a bit, because it was ingrained in the players. It was when we played Manchester United late on, you know, and we were still in with a good chance of going up, and they came to our place. I mean, Cantona and all the rest of them, you know, I mean, God, I should have thought to myself, we need to sit back a little bit here. But we were at home, you know, we've beaten everybody, we've beaten a load of the big teams anyway, we'll go for it. And so we did what we knew to do, and it wasn't good enough. So I think possibly at the end, that was where a little bit of maybe inexperience by me, you know, as a coach in that point. But it got us there. I mean, why do you change don't change a winning thing. So, I mean, but looking back, I would say probably a little bit of naivety by us. We should have probably shut up shop a bit and still try to hit them. So, on the pitch, things are obviously going very well. Off the pitch, Rule Fox said that you also encourage the players to enjoy themselves, and this part of the success came from them being relaxed and enjoying each other's company. Oh, that's interesting to know, yeah.
Well, you'll be interested to hear this then. He said, there's a quote from him saying, I thought it would be a pressure situation, but it was more like a holiday camp. What do you reckon he meant by that?
But the thing is, you could take it the wrong way like that. You know, that sounds as though players are coming in, not training, you know, having a few drinks and a laugh, you know, and a thing. Well, it was far from that. Foxy was Foxy, and Foxy liked to have a good time. And there were times when they think I didn't know about one or two things, but him and Chris Sutton were out and about a few times, which I came to my notice, and we had to curb them a couple of times. But you know, but they were young lads, you know, and they enjoyed, and we were doing well. You know, you're in the top league, you're doing really well, so you understand that, but you have to curb them sometimes, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can imagine a quote like that, but I would hate to think it was like a bloody holiday camp. God blimey.
So I'm kind of fascinated by the psychology of the squad, because there was this grit and mental resilience that you don't always associate with Norwich sides. We win the Fair Play Award. The players are enjoying themselves. It kind of seems a bit contradictory. Did you encourage all of these things at once to build this kind of...
I think so. Well, see, you know, you do things and you don't necessarily... you don't realise what the effect's having. I mean, you can see it on the pitch or you can see it, but you don't really know. Like I say, you're coming up with things now and I'm thinking, well, I didn't really think about that. It was just getting the players together, get them to play a certain way and get this mentality that, no, 1-0 down, 2-0, we're not beaten. You know, so you've got to get, that's a winning mentality. We're going to come back. And also, don't forget, you need one or two players in the team that are leaders like that. Well, Chris Sutton, he was quite tough in his own ways. You know, he used to like, have a few goes at people. Brian Gunn, you know, Gunny was a bit abrasive in that and could be like that and nasty, you know. Mark Bowen could have he wasn't shy to have a few words with people, you know, if they didn't think they were right. I remember him and Flecky squaring up one day at half-time. You know, we weren't doing so well and he came in and I just stood there and thought, well, let him get on with this, quite good this. And Flecky was going to punch Bowen and, you know, and again you think, well, the Mark's not really an aggressive sort of guy, you know. Flecky was typical Scotsman. But that's the sort of thing we had, a bit of spirit in the team. There was a bit of spirit in the team. Was it a squad of big characters? There were one or two amongst them, yeah. I wouldn't say it was the whole squad was, because you never do. But I think they all knew, it was enough of them to make it click, you know. One of the first things using the word click, one of the first things I did when I went in, and I felt was wrong, there were clicks. There was the Tottenham boys, Bowen, and I think if they would admit this, if you asked them, there was Bowen, Crookie, Polston, Culverhouse, you know, they all used to sort of sit together and have a bit of beef. They were the Scottish lads, you know, and they were the lads from the north, and I never thought that was right, you know, and that was one of the things, again, that you talk about spirit, I tried to break up, and I think we did break up, you know. By the 5th of December, we're 8 points clear at the top of the Premier League. The Times had likened you to Alf Ramsey, so I'd say things are going pretty well. What was the feeling like in the club at that point? Did we start to believe we could win the league? Well, I think then, you know, when we got that position, you've got to think about, you know, you've got to think about it. The pressure's coming on, if you like. But, you know, we were a smaller club, and we've come through. We've defeated all the odds in the sense we're going to be relegated. We've now got ourselves in a ridiculous position compared with what you just said at the start of the season. So yeah, you start talking about, but we didn't as a team say, yeah, we've got a great chance now, you know. Or maybe we did say we've got a great chance, but we never thought necessarily it's done and dusted. Yeah. And I guess there was a sort of up and down run in. We did go 6 games where we only took 3 points and only scored 1 goal, but we kind of rallied a bit and obviously finished 3rd, which I said earlier remains the club's highest ever league finish. Once the dust had settled on that season, were you proud of your achievements or disappointed we couldn't go all the way, or a mixture? Yeah, well, I would imagine the players were as well. We were disappointed because you said we were 8 points clear at one point. Okay, we have no right to think that we can just, you know, cruise on from there. And that proved to be the case. You know, teams dig in and they keep coming. There's some decent teams about, obviously. And we didn't, you know, we lost some of the games we shouldn't have lost, quite honestly. Finishing 3rd didn't qualify us for a European place, but Arsenal had already won the League Cup, which meant they'd got a UEFA Cup place. They were in the FA Cup final, and if they won that, they would get a Cup Winners' Cup place, which meant the UEFA Cup place would go to the 3rd team. It's quite complicated. Just a bit. Essentially, if Arsenal won the FA Cup, we would go into Europe. And who scored the winning goal? Andy Linnigan, ex-Norwich. Big Andy. The first game was 0-0. And then it went to a replay, and he scored late in the replay. Did you watch those two? Well, obviously you watched them live. Yeah. Who did you watch them with, and how was that for you? Well, it was a bit nerve-shredding, yeah, I would say, to say the least. You know, obviously you're hoping after a season like that, what would have been the real kick in the teeth would have been if we hadn't have got in that extra place. Apparently, after the game, after they'd won a case of champagne, went into the Arsenal changing room, and Paul Merson said, "Who's this from? Norwich." So going into that summer then, I assume you wanted to build on your success from the previous season and push on. We brought in, I think that's when we brought in Afana Kuku, I think you wanted, but on the other hand, Dave Phillips left because he couldn't agree a contract, and he actually dropped down a division, signed for Forest.
He'd scored 9 goals from us from the wing the season before. Was that a frustrating loss for you?
Yeah, quality player. I mean, he's another one. He wasn't a flash player. He wasn't particularly quick. Yeah, he was a good player. I mean, and as you say, he could score his share of goals as well. But then, as I said, the chairman's the chairman. It's I don't want to go on about him too much, but there was a lot of occasions where the finances were, I can't do that. I said, Christ, you look at it and you say, well, we finished third last year. What's the problem? The guy wants a few pennies more. Maybe they say, well, the manager didn't want him, but that wasn't the case at all. We want to keep. That's what I said. We had a nice little squad there. We want to keep that together.
Yeah, I spoke to him actually, and he said he was kind of very disappointed to leave, but I think he said he was sold to pay for the under-soil heating.
I mean, he's maybe being sarcastic, but I have sympathy with him, and I understand that. Unfortunately, that was the underlying thing at Norwich. It was at that time.
Yeah. So pre-season then, I'm always kind of fascinated by pre-seasons, not so much now but back then, because they could be really interesting. And there's some very famous stories about what the players got up to, including Gossi smashing the window of a taxi, hitting golf balls from a hotel room. Was that before you, or after you, or was that?
I don't know. I don't remember that one, but then there's a lot I don't know on that side of it, I'm afraid.
Do you have
I'm quite interested to hear.
Apparently he was on Brian Gunn's bed in his room just whacking golf balls out of the window, and then later on they went to get a taxi into town, and the back window of this taxi was smashed, and they said, what happened? He said, well, the golf course is over there, but a golf ball came from that side and smashed the back window.
I don't remember too many things happening like that. I can go back to when I first started at Norwich, which wasn't a pre-season, but it's quite an anecdote, quite funny. But a young player came to me, office was open, I always said to him, come in any time you want. Came in, got a big problem. Striker it was, funny enough. I said, what's the problem? I could get my legs broken or my kneecaps taken off. They said, what? You're having a laugh, aren't you? I said, no, it's serious. And it turned out what happened was he got himself into debt. Gambling, I think. He's a young lad again. I think he was 19, 20. Got himself into debt. And he was down in South London. And he'd gone to loan sharks. And it was like he couldn't pay it back. I think it was something like 10, 20 grand. He couldn't pay it. He's obviously not on good wages that much. What can you do? I said, bloody hell. So anyway, I went to see the chairman, and I will give Robert Chase some credit here. He said, oh yeah, we've got to help. I said, well, you've got to help him. Else you're going to, he's not going to be able to play again. This is a serious matter. These guys don't mess around. So I said, well, I suggest you give him the money, and we go down and pay these people off, and that's it. I don't know about it. Anyway, he agreed in the end. So they put the money in a paper bag, took it down. I went down with him. I went down with him and thing, and just because you had to back it up, sort of thing, we went down. Scrapyard down somewhere in the bloody middle, right down the roughest place you could get. Unbelievable. Gave them the money, and they said, "Okay, fine, that's it." Yeah. You talk about scrapes off the pitch. You don't know half the things that go on, but then things like that.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So, back to the matter at hand. Yeah. So, start of the 93-94 season, had a decent start. I mean, we lost to Man United, but we beat Blackburn again, having come from 2-1 down to win 3-2. We absolutely thumped Leeds 4-0. I was at that game, and Gossi scored a thunderbolt that even had
we played well that day, yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. And even the Leeds fans were applauding that goal. And I remember Leeds fans coming and congratulating us after the game. Another one, actually. Rule Fox said that the players snuck some beers into the hotel room the night before that game. Did you have any inkling that was happening?
No. If I did, it'd be fine. I mean, it was simple as that. But I mean, you can't. You look at those situations, and you can only control so much, can't you? Yeah. But if you find out, you get fined. I mean, players were fined for different things at different times. So it wasn't slack in that respect. But yeah, they get away with things. I mean, I wouldn't condone that. Like I said, you come back after a good win, you can have a few beers, not a problem.
So at this point, with another successful season on the cards, European football just around the corner, how far did you realistically think you could take Norwich?
I thought we could. Because of the team we'd built and the way we actually were allowed just to buy a couple of players because we couldn't spend any money, I thought the team had come together very well. And I think if we maintain that spirit, I'm not saying we'd win the league, but I think we could have maintained, at least top 8.
And before long, it was kind of time for our first venture into European football. We'd been drawn against Vitesse Arnhem, first leg at Carrow Road. How did you prepare for that?
Well, I went over and watched them twice for a start, home and away, to get a feel of how they played. And thought, yeah, okay, they're slick and they're not bad, blah, 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 but if we play as we can play, we should beat them. I rang up Bobby Robson, because he'd been in Holland, and he said, they play with 3 up front. I said, yeah, I know, but not an orthodox 3 up front. They play 1 through the middle and 2 wide.
Mm-hmm. It was 0-0 at half-time in that first game, but we went on to win 3-0. What did you change or say to the players at half-time?
And we said to the players, quicken the game up a bit, because, they're not used to that. If you again, not that we sat off, but if you let them play, it's like even now, if you let these teams just play across the back, they'll play all day. They'll play for 90 minutes like that. They won't care. That was the main thing, and we did. And obviously, because I always knew we'd score goals if we got the chances. And that's all that happened. That's the second half. We got a few more chances, and obviously we scored the goals, which put the tie to bed.
I watched those goals back recently, and at 2-0 up, we got a corner, and the ball kind of was cleared, and then it bounced around a bit, went out for a throw-in near the halfway line, came back in. Eventually, it was worked back up, and at that, when the ball's gone out, you'd expect the kind of centre backs to trot back into position. But as the ball goes back up, the most furthest forward central player up there was John Paulson, who duly scored the 3rd goal. What was he still doing up there at that point?
Too tired to get back, probably.
So, yes, won that first game 3-0. How did it feel when that final whistle went on the first European game?
Oh, yeah, it was very satisfactory, to do that. And then hence it was more relaxed when we went over there, because we, 3-goal lead. We didn't think, we know we're prone to let a few in, but we didn't think we'd let too many in there.
So, yeah, what was that like, going for Norwich's first ever European away game, 3-0 lead? It must have felt pretty good.
Yeah. But we again, you just make the emphasis that it's 3-0, but they get one early. It's the same story today. You get one early, who knows? They get the tail up, you maybe get shaky, and then suddenly it's 2-0, and they're in the game. So the emphasis was basically not go and score 4. It was to actually be a bit tighter, and let's see if we can do it. So that was where the lesson, I think, was learned a little bit there from the home campaign the year before.
So after we've seen off Arnhem, we're drawn against the mighty Bayern Munich. What are your first thoughts when you hear that draw?
Well, sounds daft, but disappointed in a way, because you think, because as you said, you're looking to go forward. Well, you want a couple of easy. Okay, they're not easy in Europe, but Vitesse turned out to be easy. But you think, well, maybe another lesser known team, so you can get 2 or 3 rounds in, and then maybe test yourself against the big boys. So to cop them straight away was a bit disappointing. But then, wow, we've got to deal with this. This is a test.
Well, yeah, the whole world wrote us off. Alan McNally said Bayern would win by 10 goals. Martin Samuel from the Times said it was just an exotic day out with a football match attached for Norwich.
Did they?
I think Lothar Matthäus might have called us a village team.
Oh, yeah.
Did you use all of that to motivate the players for that?
I didn't read stuff like that, to be honest. It's a load of crap. At the end of the day, we're out there on merit. If you look at it logically, you look at it and say, well, yeah, they should win. I no way would I think they'd win 10 or anything like that. No stupid comments. So it's a bit unfortunate that, but no, we didn't look at it that way. We just looked at we'll give our best. This is basically how we looked at it. Let's show them respect, but let's not respect them on the pitch, and let's go out and do what we can do.
And no English team at that point had won in the Olympic Stadium in Munich?
No, I never did after either, did they?
No, exactly.
They moved stadiums and some jazz, but so that's a nice little record. I always remember that.
Did you have any inkling before the game that we might win?
No, not really. I say you can't be too. You're playing a top team, and you're thinking to yourself, if we'd have gone out there negative and a bit wary, I think we probably would have lost. But we didn't. We played our game again. We just went out and said, right, it's the same. It's another game. Let's go and play. Sounds a bit silly, but it's not. It's true.
And we had a bit of a blow early on. We lost Mark Robbins to injury after 12 minutes, but we scored from the resulting free kick with what's surely the most iconic goal in Norwich City history, Jeremy Goss's flying volley. I can very clearly in my mind's eye see your celebration, back arched, fist pumped. What did that moment feel like? Oh,
it was obviously fantastic to score the first goal as well. Or to go in front rather. It was what we dreamed of. We were going out there and doing it. But and Gossi to get it as well was a bit of a turn up, because wasn't known for scoring a lot of goals. And he's another one, going back to the original thing, which I said to him, you need to add goals to your. And if you remember, he started to score. He scored some cracking goals through the year.
He did.
But it was, again, I'm not saying it's my credit to me, but I said to him, you're an up and down player. You're box to box. You don't score goals. You tackle. You do everything. You should score goals. And suddenly he seemed to be getting in positions, and he was just like scoring these fantastic goals.
I was going to ask you about that actually, because he scored in 3 of our 4 European games up to Bayern at home, but previously he'd only scored, I think, 5 in his whole league career.
Yeah, exactly.
And he'd been around Norwich for a long time in the reserves. He might get the odd game in the first team, but he really kicked on under you. Like, how did you bring that out of him?
Well, I think just saying things like that, again, there's different managers, different talk, I suppose. And I used to say to him, well, he used to run about too much, which is, people say, oh yeah, great, run. But he was out of position because he tried to do something he thought was right, and it was not the right time to do it, so it was wrong. And it was like talking to him like that and saying, look, Gossie, we appreciate the work you do and the will you got for the team and your mates, but you're making the wrong runs. Don't do that run. Hold still. Have a breather now and again. Stand still, and the ball come to you. Just calm down and play.
I mean, that goal against Bayern was a superb strike, wasn't it?
Oh, what a time to do it as well. The game to do it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And Bowen scores the second one, a header, great header. When that goal went in, I was so excited. I did a Klinsmann dive down the hallway in my house and took all the skin off my elbows and watched the rest of the game in agony. I guess it must have been pretty agonising for you watching the the last 60 minutes of that game, especially when Bayern pulled one back before half time. Yeah. What did you say to the lads at half time to kind of keep them calm?
The thing was, don't panic, but don't concede. Don't concede, obviously. Because they will get their tails up and they're a decent team. If you do your job as you're supposed to do it, it won't be a problem. But don't make it worse for yourself. If they got quality players, how I used to think of it, if they got quality players, they're going to do something magical and score. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. But don't give them a goal. Don't make a stupid mistake where you just gift it to them and they get their tails up. So that was more or less along those lines. And we know we're going to get a bit of stick now. We know we're going to get attacked. Just hold your ground. Be strong. Be solid. And really, as you say, especially in the last quarter of an hour even. They battered us to a degree, which you'd expect. But, a bit of fortune, and we held out. But the players, this is where that little bit of toughness came in then, you see. They did show some grit.
They did.
They were heading heads to get balls spinning out of the area. Gunny made a couple of decent saves. And it was a group thing again. Everybody was working back. Everybody worked hard to try and stem it. And fortunately for us, it worked out.
We ended up winning 2-1, becoming the first English team ever to beat Bayern in Munich, like we said. Did you have a party in Munich that night, or was it straight back to business?
Well, I think we were straight back, weren't we, if I remember. We were obviously delighted, I remember that. You're bound to be, aren't you? So, yeah, of course, it was a fantastic occasion, fantastic for the fans. I never forget, if you're looking up at the fans, there's a load there as well. All the green and yellow, they were hilarious. It was absolutely fantastic.
All those images, both the footage and the photographs, are all so clear in my mind's eye from that time, because it's such a massive part of my life.
No, so you can imagine it was absolutely unbelievable.
What were the Munich players like? Did any come and congratulate?
One or two.
Apologise?
Our friend Latas, that's why I said to him when he was a real... great player, nobody says that, and they all respect him today, but I was very disappointed with his attitude. Like you said, village team, just turn them over 7-7 or 8-0, no problem. And he, after the game, I saw a quote from him. Oh, we just go over there and beat them 4 or 5 or something. I don't know if he said 4 or 5, but it was just it was a banana skin, and we've come out there, we'll batter them. And I think, if I remember, he exchanged shirts maybe with Gossie, and I think he just threw his. There's star players in the world, aren't there? There's star players in the world, and you've got to have a bit of quality. That to me was lack of style, lack of class altogether. Yeah.
So with the home leg, then, I suppose being 2-1 up, the pressure's on us to hold out, which is a very different thing going into a game rather than going in as an underdog, and had a bit of a nervy start, went 1-0 down after 5 minutes, but apparently you'd already spoken to them about finding themselves in that position. So how do you kind of prepare them for finding themselves in that?
We said, well, if the worst comes to the worst, just keep your cool and just keep playing, keep competing, and go from there. Which, credit to the players, is what they did.
And Jerry Goss pops up again.
The magic man, yeah. On the occasion, yeah.
Bit of a tap-in, which is unusual for him, I suppose.
But you see, right in the box again, gone up there. It's a thing he never used to do.
So we draw 1-1, 3-2 on aggregate, knocked Bayern out of the UEFA Cup, and then we draw Inter Milan in the next round. And Dennis Bergkamp alone cost more than the entire Norwich team. But how did you feel after beating Bayern Were you confident, or?
Well, it's a bit of a blow, wasn't it? Then you think, well, we've beaten them, and then you think, well, again, I'm hoping, sensibly, I'm hoping that one of the lesser teams, that doesn't mean you'll beat them, but one of the lesser teams. And then you think Inter Milan, you think, oh, bloody hell, talk about doing it the hard way. So, but it was the same reaction, then when you calm down a bit, you think to yourself, well, yeah, okay, well, that's a challenge, let's beat them then. And of course, you're a little bit more confident because you've beaten Bayern.
And what are your kind of memories of that first leg at home to Inter?
Well, first, I don't think we should have lost. I thought it was pretty even. I thought we held our own, though, overall. And it was late on, wasn't it, with the penalty?
Yeah,
Rob Newman slid in. The thing comes back to haunt you sometimes. And dived in, shouldn't have done maybe, but, he was trying to win the ball. It wasn't a silly foul. He was trying to win the ball and the guy was too sharp for him and just nicked it. Penalty 1-0. So yeah, I mean, we felt we'd done okay. We felt because we played them then and done okay. We felt that they were beatable. We could beat them.
But we had our sort of hands tied behind our back a little bit in that second leg because I think we had Crook, Culverhouse, and Butterworth suspended, Paulson and Robbins injured.
Yep.
Koku was just on his way back, having been out for 9 weeks. So I mean, it must have been a tricky route through, I suppose, with all those.
Well, obviously that you read even today, and in those days, these teams with vast squads saying, we've got 4 players out. I mean, so what? You're bringing 4 internationals, and obviously we didn't have strength in depth in that sense. So yes, it was a bit of a blow, and I would say to this day we possibly would have beaten them with the full, with our full squad out, playing the way we played, but. Yeah, I think we had enough chances to win that game with the team we had out. Should have done. But, I can't say if we'd had the full-time team out, we'd have won. But I tell you what, I looking back on the game and the way the game went, I think we might well have won.
You said at the end of that game you had a bit of a lump in your throat. Was that kind of sadness of going out or pride in the team? Or
it was a bit of both.
Yeah.
So you think, we could have got further, and then you think, and the fans, the fans were fantastic even then. I mean, I remember again looking up in the San Siro, which is, and they were all, cheering and whatever. It was fantastic. So that was good. That was a bit of a lump in the throat job because I thought, well, they've all come over. They all support. The support at that time was brilliant anyway. All through the season, whatever. So yes, it was. I was really, really disappointed, but for the fans, for ourselves,
After that game, the Inter coach said that Norwich were the best team to play at the San Siro in a decade.
Really? I missed that one.
Did you? I mean, and apparently that included teams like Real Madrid at the time.
Yeah, well, that's a bit of an accolade, that, isn't it? It may have been a bit tongue-in-cheek, but to say that's pretty good. No, I missed that one. I'd have been pleased with that.
I was going to say.
But we had a few. I mean, a few people talked, give us compliments on the way we played, and that's why I say, maybe in England. You didn't get the credit we deserve sometimes, and I actually think the way we played suited continental style football.
Yeah. Apparently, I read at this point Atletico Madrid were rumoured to be heavily interested in taking you as manager. Did they ever come in for you?
I didn't have an approach as such, but then they could have approached the club and the chairman wouldn't tell you anyway because he wouldn't want to lose you. But then that was a double-sided sword, that, because he wouldn't tell you some things and he'd tell you other things when it suited him. So. No, I didn't. I'd heard rumours. But I didn't know about it. I didn't know anything concrete. No.
And I suppose, kind of talking about Robert Chase, I sort of felt like around this time there were the first signs that things might not all be well behind the scenes. Robert Chase made his famous quote saying that if Chris Sutton wasn't at the club at the start of the following season, then nor would he be. What was your memory of that?
He was a bit. I don't want to talk ill of him really, but. The facts were that he said a lot of things that weren't forthcoming.
Yeah, as with many of the players, your contract was heavily incentive-based, and you once said that in order to earn a decent salary at Norwich, you'd need to win the League, the FA Cup and the Eurovision Song Contest every year.
Yeah, I was going to quote that actually, but yeah. Well, I did say that, yeah, it's true.
So your stock was obviously very high at this stage. World Football Magazine had you in the top 10 managers in the world. Yet not only were you the lowest paid manager in the Premier League, but one of the lowest paid in the top 2 divisions. Understandably, you felt you'd earned a little bit more security in terms of a new contract, but that wasn't forthcoming. How did that make you feel?
Well, this is how it all ended up, wasn't it? Obviously less than pleased, to say the least. I took the job on it was 50 grand. I'll tell you what it was. It was 50 grand a year. So, but then that was then. Okay, so that was the thing, and I took it because I knew I was lucky to get the job. Going right back to the start, I was surprised to get it. So I didn't have a bargaining chip as such. So I said, okay, I'll do it for that. And again, promises. Well, you'll get this and this if you do well. Blah blah blah. Obviously, thinking that we wouldn't do so well. But then, of course, we ticked all the boxes for the incentives that first year. And I think that knocked him back. I don't think he knew what was happening. Well, hang on a minute, we're paying all these bonuses. They're earning quite good money, actually. With myself, was exactly the same. This I've done well. So I went in at the end of the first season, third, and said, well, what about a rise? No, it was more or less said that it was a fluke, which, okay, maybe a lot of people would say that, but I knew differently, but okay. And but if you do the same next season, we do as well next season, we'll give you this, this, and this. So I'm in a position, what do I do? Even then, this is the first thing. Do I leave? Do I stay and say, okay, I'll bite my lip, but we'll wait and we'll trust him to pay up, cough up when it comes. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. We've got a really good team. We're doing well. What the hell do I want to leave for? So that was it. But these things were going on behind the scenes, which obviously people didn't know, the public didn't know. So then we go, well, the next season. So it comes up to Christmas or whatever, and I'm sort of knocking on the door and saying, well, we've just done really well. We're up there again, blah, blah, blah. And then, pushing it away, can't do this, no, not going to do that. And that's how it was. And then you start hearing rumours about somebody else interested. And you start to think to yourself, well, I've done well again this season. Surely I'm worth some money, something decent. And it just wasn't forthcoming.
So around that time, Everton sacked Howard Kendall. And you're obviously in contract, not disputes, but you're kind of knocking on Robert Chase's door and nothing's forthcoming. So it's only actually 6 weeks after getting knocked out of UEFA Cup to you resigning to go to Everton. Kind of talk to me about your memories of those 6 weeks and how it all came about.
Well, we'd had we'd had this going on behind the scenes, for a period. I mean, it wasn't all in the press. And there was rumours of Everton, there was rumours of Atletico Madrid, which I'd heard, but I didn't take any notice of. And because I'd heard, I thought there's got to be some truth in these matters, I haven't done bad. So it came to a point where I went in to see him, I thought, this is my time, this is it, Because I thought, well, how far can I take? I keep taking them, I've done well again, where am I going to go? Where do we end? And it wasn't just that. He'd been pestering me to sell Sutton and Foxy. He came into me one day and said, I've got an offer for, this was the first season mine, this wasn't the second season. I have 3 million. I said, 3 million for what? For Sutton and Fox. I said, pardon? Right, Sutton's worth that on his own now. I said, give him another year or so, he'll be worth double that. Anyway, I managed to talk him out of that. He was going to sell them, just like that. And this is what had been happening before under managers, they just sell. So because I had a bit of clout at that point, he backed off. And what happened after I left? Sold him for 5 million. Sold Foxy for 2.5. So there was those sort of things going on underneath as well. So I said, no, you're not selling them. I said, we've got a bloody good team. We're at the top. We're doing well. What do you want to sell your best players for? So that was these sort of things were coming in. And as a manager, you're thinking, well, hang on a minute. Where am I going? What's going to happen here? So eventually, I said, no, I've had enough. So I went to see him. He would not budge. So I thought, well, I'm going to resign. So I just went home, I wrote a letter out, and I went in the next morning, put it in, he wasn't there. And I said, will you give this to the chairman? And walked out. And that was it. I then talked to an agent who said, well, I know Everton are interested in you, for sure. I didn't have an agent at that point. Do you want me to say something? I said, well, I've resigned this morning. So he said, oh, okay then. So they got in touch and that was it. I mean, the inference was that I'd been talking to them before. No, I hadn't spoken to anybody. And of course then he made a big fuss of it and said, this and I won't do this, and I'll fine him for that, and I don't know, all sorts of rubbish he was coming up with, I don't know. Yeah. And I said, well, no, the facts are I'm running out of contract. You promised me this, that and the other. You've reneged on it, so that's it as far as I'm concerned. And you're trying to sell players out from underneath me? I'm not, no. So that was it. That was my view. If other people see it from the outside differently, well,
When you resigned from Norwich, did you have a chance to speak to the players? And if so, how did they take it?
No, because he said, you can't come back to the ground and say or anything. So, no, I didn't, which was disappointing.
Yeah.
you know.
And was it a kind of, because I mean, six weeks earlier we were at Inter Milan, and there's a great feeling around the club. Was it sad for you to feel like it ended that way at the time?
Yeah.
Would you have stayed if he'd have offered you a new contract?
Oh yeah, that's all I wanted. So I felt, and I was a bit disappointed with some of the reaction that people gave, but then you think, well, if that's it, you know, they don't know the facts, and you've just got to get on with it. That's part and parcel of the game, I guess.
Yeah. So on to Everton then. What kind of state were they in when you took over?
Well, obviously not so good. I mean, they were struggling a bit. They were an ageing team. They didn't have a lot of. They had some young players, but they didn't have a lot of good players that you could push on. And I think they were set in their ways very much as well. Of course, going there and you think, well, I can change it, or I can do this, and I couldn't. Simple as that. Didn't have enough time. Well, maybe I didn't have enough time, I didn't have enough time. But then it wasn't. The players weren't there to do it. I don't think. Maybe I didn't have the chemistry with the players, like I did at Norwich. Maybe I wasn't strong enough in that sense at the time to say, right, get certain people out. That for whatever reason it didn't work, But we gave it a bit of a go. I got Dave Williams in with me, who was at Norwich originally, to help with the coaching. I probably would have taken John with me, but John jumped into my seat quicker than I could say anything, which fine. He took over the team. He had some ideas about what they could do, and I told him about the chairman. You couldn't do this, you couldn't do that, and within a year they were relegated, weren't they? And they'd sold Sutton and Foxy and this and that, he said. I told him, I had spoken to him before, because he used to say to me in the season, why can't we do this and why can't we sign him? And I used to say to him, John, because the chairman won't do this, he won't spend that. You've got to understand the guy, you've got to psych. I mean, I've been there a long time, and I thought I'd sussed him out a little bit, And he found out the hard way, because they sold a lot of people under. I'm not saying it's his fault they got, but they went down. So anyway, that was that side. So anyway, I went in there and we struggled a bit, obviously. Didn't have any money to spend, so it needed strengthening, it needed changing. The only good thing about it was we survived on the last day, which was unbelievable.
I was going to say, because yet again you come from a losing position. I mean, it was a difficult season. You needed to win against Wimbledon on the last game of the season to avoid relegation. 2-0 down at the break. Yep. I mean, there could not have been more pressure on you at that half time.
Well, we were relegated then. We were down at half time.
But yet again, you come back to win 3-2 and keep Everton in the Premier League. So how did you turn that around?
Well, I mean, I don't know really. We scored 3 goals. I mean, it was a question of, well, we're down and out, because at that point I think Sheffield United and someone else were drawing or winning, so they were all above us. So we were down, something like that, if I remember. And just saying, well, we've just got to go out and win the game. You've got to go out and win the second half, basically. So that was it. Fortunately. And I can't say it was anything tactical, anything wonderful. We just went out. They just had to go, to be fair to them. I mean, I guess it was pride for themselves as well. A lot of the players then must have thought, we don't want to be in the lower leagues, and the team that's taken Everton down. I think it was a lot to do with them rather than me anyway. And I think they just, they rallied round. We managed to score the goals. Stuart scored 2. And all hell broke loose after that. No, it wasn't good. But it was great to get clear and see the elation of the family and the fans. The fans overall at Everton were very good. I mean, I didn't feel I was particularly picked on at all.
So after you got sacked by Everton, you had a dispute with them about getting the money that you're owed, and I believe you couldn't take another managerial role until you'd got that money. Otherwise, you wouldn't have got what you'd earned. Yeah.
I made a stand. I actually had an offer, and this is, I can mention the teams because it's true, I had an offer from Sheffield Wednesday in that time, and an offer from Ipswich, because obviously up the road and they knew me and all the rest. And I used to go to Ipswich quite a bit to watch games, so I knew the directors and people. And so I met in a hotel in Cambridge with them and talked to them, and they said, well, we want you to take the job now. I said, I can't take it now. Now, it sounds it's all about money. Well, I'm afraid it was all about money, at that time, in my mind then. And I said, I'm sorry, if you can wait another 2 weeks, hopefully this will be resolved in 2 weeks. I'm your man. And he said, no, we can't. So I said, well, sorry, you'll have to, I can't dictate to you, you do what you have to do. So they went and appointed a guy, and I sat tight. So that was that. So then when I eventually got the money, which I did, yes, I invested in a house, and I made the best I could. And then I wasn't working for a while, and I went back to Norwich eventually.
I have to say, I'm glad you held out and didn't go Ipswich as a Norwich fan.
No, but it's an obvious one, yeah. And I might, again, when you think about it, I might have thought, because Norwich, it's like Spurs and Arsenal, they don't want to go together,
Yeah.
And so when it came to it, but we did have a meeting, I will admit that, and but they had to make a decision. I said, fine, you better go ahead and do it then.
So in that meantime, you invested in a skip hire firm in Norwich. Yeah. And I want to read this quote to you from an interview you did in the Independent in 1996, which says, "I thought it was better than sitting on my backside doing nothing. Everyone gets the impression that because I had a good payoff, I must be loaded and can play golf every day. It might have been like that for Kevin Keegan, who's financially secure, but I've spent all my career in the lower leagues. I wasn't that well paid at Norwich, and this is why I made a stand at Everton. I was not going to be abused by the chairman. The business has kept me occupied, and it's added a few things to my CV. I can erect fences and all sorts, but it's no substitute for football," which I absolutely love. Like, I can remember as a kid getting really excited when I saw an Ace skip hire lorry coming down the road. And the thought of a Premier League manager erecting fences, you just wouldn't get that today, and you probably wouldn't have got it much then. So what are your memories of being involved in that business in that time?
Oh, it was exactly what you've just read out is exactly right, exactly how I felt. I decided, and I had a bit of money, so I decided, it's a good story, actually. I was sitting around doing nothing, and it was like basically, well, I've got to do something. I hired a skip, and this guy came round, and we were talking, and he said, don't know anybody wants to buy a skip hire, do you? It was one truck. And I said, no, not really, no. So he said, well, it'll only be a few pennies, and whatever. So he went away, and he came back. He had to take some more stuff out from the house. And I said, so we talked it over, and he said, are you sure? So I thought, well, I've got anything to do. Maybe that would be interesting. It's always going to be waste, isn't it? It's always rubbish. So that was it, as simple as that. And he said, I think he wanted, what did he want now? 11,000 for a truck and one skip and the truck. Unfortunately, which it was fortunate at the time, I talked to my neighbour who came in. So he came in with me, and I think he put 500 in, and I paid the rest. So we found a yard, we set up, and lo and behold, it started to go quite well, because I was quite well known. So I ended up driving the lorries around as well. I didn't have an HGV, but we had the smaller one I could drive. So I used to go, and I found it was like quite relaxing, it was all right. And you meet some odd people and dodgy people. So we did that, and then we made a few bops. So we then expanded and made it a bit bigger, and then we rented a big yard in by the Post House Hotel on Ipswich Road at the back there. And yeah, it was going quite well, So, but then I got back into football, which was then, So then things started to go wrong after that. But I got basically stitched up. I don't mind telling you either. So it was by my partner, but there you go. Yeah, so that ended. But that was because I was getting involved I was back in football, and I couldn't keep an eye on it, and I didn't have anybody else there, and one thing led to another, and that was a big bust up at the end of the day.
It's a shame.
I did enjoy it, I have to say.
Did you? Because I guess if you're in Norwich, everybody knows who you are. So how do people react when they hire a skip?
Well, it was quite good. Some looked a bit amazed when you drive, you get off the lorry or whatever. But it was taken quite again because it's a small place really, isn't it? And everybody knew, especially after all the success. Yeah. It was a good period. It was after you look at all the glamour of football and all this stuff, but it was quite an interesting period. Yeah, I wish I'd have been more alert. I got actually told by another person in the business that there's something going on at your place. He said, you need to look it out. I actually was told that by another skip guy. And I said, well, I'm busy. And it turned out there was something going on. So at the end of the day, I lost out on that big time, which ended up going to several court cases and different lawyers were involved. But I didn't come out of it very well at the end of the day. I lost a lot of money on that. So it can happen, it happens to people. You read about it and you think, oh yeah, shame, but it actually happened to me as well.
So back to Norwich, but in June 1996, you're back at Norwich. How did that come about?
Well, again, as I said, I wasn't working, and I obviously wanted to get back into football, and nothing was really happening. I'd applied for a few jobs here, there, and everywhere. League clubs, not Premier. I thought, well, I won't push myself to think I'm that clever. That if it comes along, it comes along. But sort of first, second division club, I mean, Bury, people like that, I went before they went out of the thing. There was quite a few little clubs I'd gone for, but nothing happened. And then I was thinking, well, I'll leave it for a bit. And then Norwich came in again, and they say never go back, don't they? But I thought, well, what the hell? I'm working. They were in the Championship then, and I thought, well, that's all right. I can maybe start off from scratch and do a good job in getting them back up. That was the key thing.
And again, a common theme, but they were struggling. They'd finished just 5 points shy of relegation from what's now the Championship. Deep in debt, backroom staff shipped out, so it's another difficult job to take on. Did you think it was a risk?
Oh yeah, so I mean it's always a risk. I'd gone back, obviously the personnel had all changed pretty well. There was one or two there, but I think. But yeah, a good challenge. I had some good kids coming through, the Darren Edis of the world, were there, and a few others. And so I thought, yeah, why not? I can, at least I know the club, I can help rebuild it, and hopefully we can, the key was then to get back in the Premiership, obviously.
It felt like a bit of a whirlwind those first few weeks because Ian Crook had agreed to move to Ipswich and been pictured holding up the shirt, which broke my heart, but suddenly he was back.
It didn't do me any good either. I wasn't, because he was, again, although he was getting older, he still would have been my key player. So.
Yeah, but apparently you saw a loophole in his contract that allowed to get him back, is that right?
Yeah, we're not as stupid as we look sometimes, Yeah, there was a loophole, I can't exactly remember what it was, but that's right. But we got him back, and that, again, I was in the bad books of Sheepshanks, he wasn't too impressed at all. He slagged me off something terrible.
So you were back, Crook was back, the fans were happy to see the back of Robert Chase. Did it feel like an exciting time?
Oh, yes, I thought, yeah, great, I'm back in it, I'm back where I know the club, and if I'm given a fair crack at a whip, why shouldn't we do something? Why can't we do well?
Do you think that sort of excitement of new ownership, you coming back, Crook doing that U-turn, Fleck come back, do you think that masked the issues that were actually happening at the club in terms of money and debt?
Yeah, probably, but I mean, again, you can't keep thinking about that. You're aware of it, but you can't sort of let it obstruct your work.
And it started well, I think. We were top of the league at the start of October, but then fell away and finished 13th. Do you think that was a success considering where they were when you took over? Was it a disappointment to you?
Well, I think it's disappointing if you're top and doing well. I was disappointed we dropped away that far anyway. If you drop away to 5th or something, yes, but not. That was a big disappointment at the end of the day. Yeah. Sometimes it's not in your control. If you get key players injured, 3 or 4 key players injured, and then you can't do anything. Okay, so it's the manager's fault. Well, it's not really, is it? If the team's playing well with the full team, then you haven't got the full team. What can you do?
I think that hit you even worse in the second season. At the start of the second season, you bought Ewan Roberts and Craig Fleming, who both went on to be club stalwarts. I think Craig Bellamy also broke through at that time. What was he like to deal with as a young player?
Horrible man. Was he? Great lad. No, he's a great lad, but he's very misunderstood. Okay, he thought he knew more than he knew at that age. And he would always still say, oh no, I don't think I should do that. I should play like this, or I should play like that, And often he was wrong. Sometimes he was right. But he needed to be pegged back, but he had a lot of talent. I mean, there was no doubt about that. Very talented. And a lot of people didn't like him because, you hear the stories when he was at Liverpool or somewhere, he was taking a golf club and going to batter somebody. But that's how he was. He could, as you start fighting an empty telephone box, that's just, he was him.
So we had a difficult season that season. There was a lot of injuries. We used 30 different players that season, and only 4 of them managed to play more than 30 games. How difficult was that second season for you?
That was the problem. Even then, we had key players injured, like you said. I even had a Ewan I signed, and I spoke to Ewan not long ago. 5 years ago, so it was a long time after, the time. And he said to me, I'm really sorry, I felt I let you down. I said, well, you didn't let me down. Things didn't work out at the time. The team wasn't functioning because so many injuries. I think at one time, I don't know if you quote, I think we had 17 players out. And of those, probably 9 of them were first-team players. And the ironic thing was that when we started to get them back, and I always said this, I said, when we get our players back, we'll be right. We won 5-0 at Swindon, I think, on the Wednesday, and we beat Huddersfield 5-0 on the Saturday because some of the players were coming back, and I got sacked the following week. But what can you do?
So after that departure from Norwich, it's a couple of years before you take your next job, but you were linked with lots of jobs in that time, from Wales to Hartlepool and loads of jobs in between. What was that period like for you, and were you close to taking any of those jobs?
Wales. Obviously, although a lot of people maybe don't realise, but I am Welsh. I was born in Wales, and I don't live there very long. I applied for the Welsh job, and again, another big story. I thought I basically had it. I travelled up to near Wrexham and had a meeting with them, and it sounded very positive. And they said, "Well, okay, go home. We'll let you know in a couple of days." And it was almost like, we're just going to report back, and that's it. And then didn't hear anything. Next thing I knew, I think it was Bobby Gould got it, didn't he? I think he was the one got it straight at me. And I thought, well, where did that come from? So again, you can't take anything for granted.
But you do finally get back into football in 2000 here in Cyprus with Apoel Nicosia. Why them?
Well, because they were the ones that came in, basically, and they were the biggest club. I mean, that was the other thing. I mean, obviously, as you appreciate, I didn't know anything about Cypriot football, at all, literally. But obviously, you do some homework straight away, and you find out them and Ammonia were the two big teams, which are both in Nicosia. So I flew out there, and it was okay. I thought, well, it looks a good setup. They just had a new stadium built up there. Training ground was okay. It wasn't great, but it was okay. And I thought, they'd had a few threats to burn the ground down. They get a bit cut, it's a bit like South Americans. They get a bit, for things not going right. The team was used to winning everything. They were like just 3 or 4 off the bottom or something. And the fans had said they're going to burn the training ground down. So the chairman got a bit of panic on. They had to sack the manager. So Muggins goes in there. Anyway, went quite well. We got to have some half-decent players. I thought they were all right, And we started winning games, and we ended up. Well, we would have won the league if they hadn't lost. I think they lost the first 6 or something, and those points cost us, because I think we won every game. I think till the end of the season, or only lost one, and we got to the semi-final of the cup and lost on that, and that was rigged apparently. So I'm told. You wouldn't believe what goes on over here. They always say it doesn't, but it does. And got to the end of the season, and the two guys who were really good, 2 Cypriot guys, and they said, well, we understand your philosophy, where you want to go, blah, 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 but we can't sustain it. We haven't got the money to sustain it. So, story of my life. They leave, and in comes another guy who's, from the day I met him, I knew, this is a problem. I'm doing it this way. We're going to sign him. We're going to do that. Hold on a minute. What am I doing here then? So I worked the first 2 or 3 games. I don't know, maybe 5 games. I don't know. It was like not going to work. And then we lost the game, and I was sacked after. I went to the television studios here to do a thing, and one of the guys I know there said to me, "Oh, you're getting a sack, or you've been sacked." I said no, and they then told me on the television, "You've been sacked." So I said, "Okay, great." So that was it. But it was interesting.
Did they not try and slander you by saying that you were an alcoholic or something on the job?
Yeah.
And did that affect you, like going forward, trying to get other jobs here?
No, that didn't. They I think, and again, it's not something that's known, but I think somebody blacked me here for sure, because I refused to throw matches, basically, and my players told me a couple of times, "Oh, we're going to lose the game on Saturday because we've been told we've been offered money." I said, "I find you've been offered money. I'll throw you be out the door tomorrow. No pay, nothing." And they didn't. We actually went and won the game, and I actually had someone stop me in Nicosia one day and said, are you going on Saturday, super? And I said, we're playing one of the better teams. And they said, I think we'll win. No, you won't. We've been told you'll lose. You're going to lose. I said, oh, really? So we'll see. Well, we went and won. And that happened on 2 occasions. And those 2 occasions were big occasions for the other team. And I know there's a lot of betting goes on over there, or over here. And at the end of the day, people may have lost a lot of money, maybe. Because I went for 3 jobs in particular where I actually got the job the night, went back, said, I got the job, I've been back in football. Next morning, didn't have it. So after about 2 or 3 jobs, I just gave up. I thought, well, what's the point? There's obviously somebody said something and whatever.
That's amazing to know that sort of still goes on.
Well, there's been a case just lately, they're looking at it, the FA, but nothing ever happens. And they won't, you ask Cypriot, they say no, nothing like that here. Others say, yeah, of course.
Do you feel like you've been hard done by in your career?
Yeah, I mean, a bit, yeah, I'd say, but I don't hold grudges. I mean, I was hard done by at Colchester. I mean, fine, top of the league, and then suddenly you're sacked for no reason. Yeah, so I wouldn't you think that's a bit hard done by? I would have thought, cool, I don't know. But it's just something you know, I just, like you bring up now, I don't think about it every day, but you know, bring it up and you make think, yeah, maybe it was, maybe not.
Just finally then, you went back to Norwich for the Legends game against Inter Milan a few years ago. What was it like to catch up with that group of players from what must have been
it was excellent. Yeah, they still call me Gaffer and whatever, and other names. No, it was, I mean, I was surprised. I went back, I thought, well, I will go back for that. And when we went, we met up again and, the players, it was nice. It was that feeling, that camaraderie that was there that time, Right.
Mike, that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for your time. Sorry it went on so long. It was much longer than I expected, but I appreciate it.
Cool, blimey, yeah.
The Splendid Rush podcast was researched, hosted and edited by me, Winston Gallagher, with additional research from football writer Michael Gibbons. The sound recordist was Sean Smith.